Hello! In this video I want to show you a very useful exercise that is going to help you develop your bebop sound and your improvisations. It's based on the use of bebop scales, that some people say these are not real scales, but I don't want to get into this debate today. At least for me, these are a very useful tool, so I don't see any reason not to use them. In order to play this exercise you need two prerequisites. First of all, you need to have a good knowledge of your arpeggios. If this is not the case, you can have a look at the video that I linked in the description that I made on this very topic. And second of all, you also need to know your bebop scales very well. But if this is already the case, you can jump directly at the later part of this video where I show the exercise. And if not, then I will now start by explaining the bebop scales, what they are designed to be doing, and how you can practice them. So the whole idea behind the bebop scale is to always be able to land a chord tone of whatever chord is being played in the background along with the downbeat of the metronome. So for instance, if you play in C, then the chord tones are C, E, G and A. And you want to always be able to land these notes with the beat of the metronome or the downbeat, because these notes are actually consonants, so good sounding, and so you want to have them on strong times. The problem is when you play a normal major scale, such as here, then the last note actually falls on the offbeat, and this creates a feeling of imbalance somehow. So the solution for that was to actually add an extra passing note to the major scale, which then creates the major bebop scale. And you add an extra note between the 5th and the 6th, and then you end up with a scale which sounds like this. You should practice this scale in all positions, so also an octave higher, for instance. Or maybe even higher. And when you practice, you can also try to bring a little bit of rhythmic variations. So and there's also an exercise that you can use in order to practice these bebop scales, and it also uses arpeggio, so it's a quite good exercise, and it goes as follows. So you start with an arpeggio which starts on a chord tone of the scale that you're practicing. So for instance in C, either C major 7, E minor 7, G7 or A minor 7. And so you go up the arpeggio and down with the bebop scale. So let's start with the C, for instance. It sounds like this. Or maybe you want to start with an E minor 7, then it sounds like this. When you start with an A, there is something peculiar which happens, and you can actually hear it for yourself. So here I added a passing tone between the D sharp and the E. And the reason for that is that when you play the A minor arpeggio, when you reach the end of the arpeggio, there is no available chord tone directly next to the last note. So if you want to actually reach another chord tone, you have to add a passing note, for instance, to reach the third and to bring the balance again. So this is what I did here. I also explained this in the other video that I did on arpeggios, so if you want more details, then check that out. Of course, you can also play this scale on dominant scales. So if you have a dominant chord, a C7, then you would be playing the dominant bebop scale on that. And the idea is the same. You add an extra note in order to be able to play all the chord tones of C7 on the downbeats of the metronome, but here the note is not between the 5th and the 6th, but it's between the 7th and the tonic. So the scale sounds like this. Or if you play it somewhere else. And then again you can bring a little bit of rhythmic variations. And the same exercise that I presented for the major scale also works for the dominant scale, so you should practice that as well. And if you do this, then you should have a pretty good knowledge of the bebop scales, and you can then move on to the exercise that I'm going to present now. just there is an example of what you can achieve if you practice this exercise, and the idea behind the exercise is to try to create a never-ending chain of arpeggios and bebop scale where you always try to land a chord tone on the downbeat of the metronome. And so the idea is that you would go up with an arpeggio, for instance, C major 7, and then you go down or up the scale to reach the next available chord tone and then start another arpeggio. So for instance, if I start with C major 7, go down the scale, and then here I'm at my next chord tone, which would be E, and then I start the E minor arpeggio. So, of course, you can also play several arpeggios after one another. So for instance, if I start on E, then I continue with C, and then I can go down the scale maybe, and then play the next arpeggio. So there's really no limit here, but you want to try to really create a never-ending chain. So let's try to do that again. When you practice this exercise, it's generally a good idea to beat the rhythm with your feet, so that you have a good idea of whether or not you're actually falling on the downbeat. So let's start with C major again. And then again, if you have practiced this in major, you can of course then practice the same exercise with the dominant bebop scale. So for instance, C7, C dominant. And the idea is exactly the same. So you try to mix the arpeggios and the bebop scale in order to create a never-ending chain. So if I do then the same idea with C dominant and start, let's say, on the third, I could obtain something which sounds like this. Starting again from another chord tone, maybe the third. And of course, you should practice this in all positions from the major and the dominant scale in order to be able to play this in all different contexts. So if you have liked this video or if you have questions, then you can leave a comment. I will try to answer this. And I have to mention something. These exercises are actually taken from this book here, which is a very, very good book. I cannot recommend this enough. The only problem is it's written in German. And I haven't found any English version of this, so that's also partially why I'm doing this video, because I want to show these exercises to everybody. Nevertheless, if you can read German, then buy this, it's worth it.